and welcome back to the Escape Down Under podcast, coming to you after the 6th and final stage of the men's Tour Down Under for 2024. Plenty to discuss from today's stage, of course, but before we get to that, my name is Matt Neef. Hello, thank you for listening. Rup, good to have you back.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's great to be here. A little bit sad, because it's always a bit sad at the end of a tour, but really looking forward to what we're going to chat about.
And Ronan McLaughlin, hello.
It's kind of bittersweet. I wouldn't say it's sad. It's like there is a relief. There is a, like, you can relax. The main work is done. But I'm also feeling nauseous with fatigue. So it's probably a good job we're nearing the end as we speak.
Stage 6 of the Tour Down Under, Unlead to Mount Lofty. The final stage of the race, as we said yesterday, the race was really interestingly poised coming into the final stage with the top two guys on GC on the same time and a bunch of riders within close proximity to one another. So just about anything could have happened today. It got off to a really aggressive start. We saw a bunch of riders trying to get away on the uphill start to the stage, I should say, including Chris Harper, who was so instrumental on Wollonga yesterday. He was on the move and actually got a bit of a gap over the top of the KOM to start with, and it looked like he was trying to get away early and trying to really shake up the race for Jayco, who have had a tricky week, as I'm sure we'll get to a bit later on. Eventually there was a 7-rider break that got away, and they ended up building a lead that extended to around 4 minutes at one point, but it never really looked like they were going to stay away, and sure enough, with about 4 kilometres to go in the stage, it all came back together. The break was caught and the peloton was heading into the final ascent of Mount Lofty, the third ascent up there, for what would eventually be a small bunch finish up there. Rupert, what was your impression of the final kilometres there coming into that final dash to the line?
I mean, first up, I was not surprised, but I was certainly impressed by how fast it was. We did speak about how fast that finish would be, and I was not surprised, though, that there was a group there at the end. When you see sheer speed and tooth and nail fighting for a stage win, whoever was going to win that, it's still exciting to see. Of course, Stephen Williams, his win in the stage was great, and it backed up the fact that, the previous days before Wollonga, he said if Wollonga had finished on a group finish, a small group finish, that would suit him, and he almost backed that up by winning that at the stage at Wollonga, and the fact that he was able to back it up and go one better and nail it and defend and ultimately win the tour was a great victory by him. But there were some other interesting results there, even when you just look at the stage results, the first 3 on the stage with Williams and Narvaez and Del Toro, again, they've been the strongest all week, and you've got speed, you've got climbing ability, you've got audacity, panache, all those sort of words I could just throw out of a dictionary. So I thought it was a nice, thrilling finale to an otherwise, I think, not the most exciting sort of tour.
Yeah,
but keep it on the up. It was a great finale.
We'll get to that for sure. Right.
It was a great finale. It was hugely impressive from Williams. Also, he, as you mentioned there, he backed it up. But he was so impressive today. It's kind of hard to figure out how he didn't win the stage yesterday. It was similar sort of scenario. Obviously, just got his timing in that perfect today. A slight downhill run to the finish. He had the extra speed on. He also was running with a 55 tooth chainring, if I remember correctly. I had a look this morning. Pretty sure I seen a 55 on his bike there, which would have helped in that downhill sprint to the finish. And yeah, it was. We said last night it would probably be one of the 2 riders who were locked on time coming into the stage that would likely go for the win, and whichever one of them took the win would obviously take the overall. And Williams came through.
I also think with Oscar Onley, in due respect to him, his big race was yesterday. And when you think back of it, again, benefit hindsight, you saw him at the finish yesterday. He was he collapsed. He was on the ground. He threw everything into that. And that was great to see, though. He's a young guy who's on the up. We're going to see a lot more of him, and he's not scared to try, willing to dare, all that sort of stuff. So I don't think, certainly can't be critical of him today.
Yeah.
And I think it's more about Williams's assertion of the lead, defending the lead, and after all the work that Israel Premier Tech did this week, he had to deliver at the end, and he did. And I think it was a credit to the team as well. I think they covered all bases. They covered the setbacks. They lost one of their riders, and they're key riders, and they're the deserved winners.
Yeah.
He's the deserved champion.
I've got some anecdotes to share with you a bit later on about Israel Premier Tech, but I do want to talk about the last few kilometres because I feel like it was interesting coming into that finish how it all unfolded. We had Ineos on the front a bunch throughout the stage, actually, in those closing stages, and they were doing a lot of work for Narvaez, and they looked really good, and he looked really good. With about 2Ks to go, it all split up, and the peloton was down to probably 10 riders or something. And then it was Isaac Del Toro, who we talked about after stage 2, who, such an impressive win for him at just 20 years old. He was the one that actually split it up further with about 1.5 kilometres to go. And then there was an attack from... We actually couldn't work out who it was. Even the commentators couldn't work out who it was at the time. An FDJ rider.
Yeah, Lawrence Pitty.
It turned out to be Lawrence Pitty, the
New
Kiwi.
Zealander.
Yeah. An awesome ride from him, and it looked like for a moment there that he was going to get away and win the stage.
A little sidebar there, if that's okay, Matt.
Please.
Because after they finished, they're just rolling down from the finish line down to their team cars, and Lawrence just was rolling down, and he's saying, "Idiot, idiot," and I'm thinking, who's he? I thought, who's he accusing now of something that happened? I just sort of kept observations on him, and he went back to the Francais de Jeu van. He hit the esky, just sort of slapped the esky, sorry. He slapped the esky. You could tell he was frustrated. And I thought, is he going to find who this idiot is? And then he went into the van. Then I still heard him say F ... a couple of times. Then he came out of the van, and then he got on his bike, and he rolled away about 20 metres behind another a first aid van, but he just sort of found a nice shaded area, collapsed on the ground in the shade, slumped against the barriers, away from anyone. Then he starts using the F ... word. I think I heard a couple of idiots there, and he was on his iPhone. I'm not sure if he was watching a replay of the sprint or calling home, I don't know. Myself and a couple of other journalists sort of saw that, and when we found out that he was just, the idiot was he felt was himself, that he blew a chance to win something, and he was just frustrated. And I think one thing I give him credit for, that he did find that what he thought was hope he was going to be a private place of solace. He probably didn't expect there was going to be 3 journalists who noticed that. But his intent was to not make a big scene in front of his teammates in the team, who were probably just happy to have finished and not be not give the perception of being a prima donna. He just went by himself and vented his frustration. And but one thing I'll stop in a second, because I know we'll talk about it later, but looking to the Cadel Evans road race, his effort today probably threw him out there as a dark horse for next week. Maybe not with the peloton a dark horse, they'll notice full clear, but I'd say watch out for him in Geelong next week.
He's a really exciting young rider, actually. 21 years old, from New Zealand. He had a very good season last year. He finished second at the Classique Loire Atlantique in France, a one-day race there. And the following day won the Cholet Pays de Loire. I'm sure I've butchered those names, but a couple of really good races there in France in the one-days. And looks to be a very exciting and strong rider. And the ride he put in today, maybe it was an issue of timing. I think maybe the idiot comment directed at himself was about the timing, potentially, but he looked very strong. And there was a moment there in the press room, actually, where one of the journalists said, that's it, that the stage is won. It looked like he was riding away to the win. A very strong effort from him.
It was a very strong effort, and he had, while he was off the front of that league group, if I remember correctly from watching the finish, there was actually a small gap between Del Toro when he made his move, Narvaez, and there was a third rider with him, can't recall off the top of my head, but again, going back to Steve Williams here, but there was a gap there, and just the way he closed that gap was incredibly impressive. And not only did he close it, but then obviously he had enough to go on and win the stage. But I think had it not been for that move of Del Toro, then it might have been Lawrence Day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I asked Williams at the end of the stage actually about those last few kilometres, because there were a few moments there where he was caught out of position, not only in that last little bit, but a couple of times before that in the last 10 kilometres. And he said
there was also a huge crash with 7.5 kilometres to go, which caught out of position can be a major problem if you caught up in the crash like that. That could have been his GC over.
Yeah, that's right. And I think he was caught, not necessarily behind that, but I think it slowed him down and put him out of position. But he was saying about that, the struggling with position, that he was never terribly worried, largely because he had Nick Schultz with him, and Nick did an awesome job of bringing him up to the front again and again. And Yeah, he was just so appreciative of his teammates' work, not only today but throughout the
Nick
week.
Schultz wasn't appreciative of having to do it over and over again.
We should talk about the finish. I was fortunate enough right after the finish to go straight to where the Israel Premier Tech camp was set up. And sometimes with these finishes, it can be difficult to find where they are. They're sort of in an area, but they might be split off from the rest, and you don't know which direction to go in. And I lucked into finding exactly where they were, and I got there just as the sports directors, Daryl Impey and Sam Bewley, were arriving in their car. And I started filming on my phone because I knew that it would be a nice moment as I got out of the car. And sure enough, Sam Bewley gets out of the car, bare feet on this really kind of uneven, horrible ground, and he jumps out and he's running around the side and trying not to hurt his feet. And then Daryl Impey jumps out and they're hugging each other enthusiastically. And it was just a really nice moment seeing how much it meant to those guys. And obviously Daryl Impey's won this race twice before, and he's helped Simon Gerrans win this race before, but seeing how much it meant to him and to Sam Bewley to win the race as sports directors was really quite touching.
Yeah, it was good. And there was another, the DSM car was next to them. I saw a moment where Oscar Connolly, he came over to congratulate. Obviously Stephen Williams was up at the podium, but first thing he did was to come over and congratulate the Israel Premier Tech riders.
Classy.
It's still nice to see human sporting gestures and understand this is just a bike race. We threw it all out there this week, and sounds simple, but so often in professional sport these days you read the headlines and read a lot of stuff, see a lot of stuff, and those intrinsic human qualities can get lost in the narrative. But when you walk, one of the great things about cycling, we do get exposed to that area. It's not like locker rooms and football games which are closed off to. You see that spontaneous reactions, just like Pitty's reaction, his self-frustration. We get to see that. And just walk. All you're doing is walking around, and the punters can be doing the same thing. It's a great quality of cycling.
The other thing we seen was just as Williams had crossed the line and he came to a halt and sort of slumped on the ground. Obviously, all his teammates and the team staff are going to be, celebrating with him. We see that every time someone wins a race. But I thought there was something. There seemed to be like a unique bond between the whole team. As he was slumping the ground, they were coming up. They weren't just celebrating. They weren't just like high-fiving or hugging, whatever. There seemed to be an extra dimension to it. I couldn't put a finger on what it was, but just watching them on TV, he was slumping the ground. They were coming down, hugging around him, and it was just a great moment.
Yeah.
It's interesting listening to Impey talk about it after the stage, and he talked about how they were really the underdogs in this race, which I agree with. They were the only pro team or pro continental team in the old parlance at this race in a field that was dominated by World Tour teams.
I don't know if I buy that though. I mean, they had a strong team here, much stronger than the likes of Arkea, Cofidis.
It's true, but when we were talking about potential winners of this race, George Bennett was maybe up there in the top five. That we didn't talk about them having a possible winner overall, I don't think. And even Corbin Strong.
I think it was once they got into the jersey, then you're looking at the rest of the team and you're going, oh yeah,
actually,
this is strong.
They're pretty strong. Yeah. But certainly I think they came into the race well down the ladder when you compare them to someone like Jayco. We talked about how they had Simon Yates and also Luke Plapp as potentials for the overall.
Yep.
I don't think anybody realistically thought they would win the overall. I certainly didn't think that Stevie Williams would win the overall. But it was interesting hearing Impey say that, and then one of the reporters put that to Williams after the finish, said something like, oh, you guys were underdogs coming to this race, and it was almost like he was offended by that. He said, well, I don't think that's the case at all. You look at the list of guys we brought here, we were nailed on to do a good ride here, and I think that shows a real confidence and, again, that kind of belief and team bond that they obviously had. An impressive effort.
No, I agree with that. And, early before the stage today, I was talking to Daryl just about, his outlook on what makes a team and how a team operates, more the philosophical side of things. But he was saying how they didn't say they came here to win, but they came here to get several guys high up on GC. Just think of working towards that, and I guess sounds more like a more across the board sort of goal or ambition or approach. But it's not. That's just saying we're coming here to win, because as soon as you say we're coming here to win, whether it's fair or not, the if you don't win, the sort of why you didn't win. But if you're saying we're just going to have 2 or 3 guys up there overall in bike racing, if you are able to do that, the cards are all in your favour to actually optimise whatever opportunity arises. And there they had 3 guys, Corbin Strong, obviously Stephen Williams and Derek G, to win. Then you've got your brains trusts like Simon Clark and George Bennett, who's got bigger aspirations for later in the year. But you think, gee, that's 5 people out of that team. That's a pretty... Again, I keep talking about benefit of hindsight. You look back at it and you think, holy dolly. They were actually on paper a really, really strong team, and they delivered. And also, as you said about Schultz, they did. The whole team delivered throughout the whole week, and without each of those riders doing what they did, who knows what would have happened in a race that ultimately came down to seconds with time bonifications. But you've got to strategise who you set out for the time bonuses and why and when. And Darryl is, with his experience, and Sam Bewley, they obviously, as 2 former teammates, and Simon Clark being a former teammate, you suddenly realise, was this right under our nose?
Yeah, it's a good point.
So I just think it's a really interesting dynamic there, which I'm really excited to see where it goes to from here.
What an amazing start for Darryl Impey and Sam Bewley as sports directors, hey?
Yeah, do you like his line when he said, what's the difference between, winning as a rider here twice and being a sports director? And he said, this was going to be a big night tonight. He said, this time I don't have to worry about the next races, Not Sam, I said Darryl, didn't I?
Yeah, that was Darryl.
Darryl, yeah. So good on you, Darryl, and cheers to you, mate. And the other guys on the team. Or people on the team.
How do we feel about the race overall? Roop, you kind of touched on it before, that there was some maybe dull moments throughout the race. And
look, I don't want to be a party pooper because we've just been got on to a high here, and but I think overall it wasn't the most exciting Tour Down Under. I'm not going to say it was the least exciting because there were a lot of years. This race next year is going to be the 25th Tour Down Under race, notwithstanding the 2 years when it was an NRS event. There used to be in Greipel used to win a whole bunch sprints and that sort of stuff. But even in the context of the event in those years, they were exciting because it was about leaving an imprint of the world's best riders coming here. It was like that shock appeal, get to see them, the world's best. Now I think the punters and how the race has developed, and the fans and the media are expecting an event that does become exciting from a more purist point of view rather than the spectacle of just having big names here. And I think this year was kind of frustrating for a lot of people, including the teams. A number of riders and sports directors this week did say, it's a shame it hasn't been such a great nail-biting race as it could have been. I think a lot of people were talking about maybe stage 3 was an opportunity missed that could have energised the race. But, it's not the first time or the last time any bike race. I've seen boring Tours de France.
It's true.
Number of Tours de France which, for 3 weeks, sometimes it's very easy to criticise. And I know I've critiqued, not criticised, but I just labelled it a bit. It was kind of boring. But it was still an exciting week in many ways too, because a lot of the stories that evolved of riders were great stories in their own. This is a scene-setting event, notwithstanding it is a World Tour event, but a scene-setting event for the season to come. So there's a lot of positives that far outweigh the label of it being kind of a boring race. So I think we've got to be careful about being too harsh on how we remember this event.
The other difficulty, and I mentioned in the podcast earlier in the week, was Stuart O'Grady, the race director, had mentioned at a presentation I was at, he was speaking at it, and he had said the difficulty in finding the balance between exciting stages and stages for the spectators versus finding stages that the teams want at this time of year, bearing in mind it's the opening race of the season for the 99% of these riders, or all the riders minus the Australians who have raced their national championships. And I can guarantee if the race was too hard, if they'd used some of the incredibly steep roads here as like Murdahui style finishes, or spent more time in the Adelaide Hills, you'd probably have the teams complaining in the other direction that the Tour Down Under is getting too hard. And certainly, if the Tour Down Under had released a parkour that looked very, very difficult, you wouldn't get the likes of the Sam Welsfords and the Caleb Ewans and that travelling, and the big sprinters like the Greipels and that before. So it's a very difficult balance, and I think ultimately what the vast majority of the riders want is 2 weeks in the Hilton, 2 weeks of sunshine, and 6 days of racing. And beyond that, they may well critique different editions of the Tour Down Under as being better or more exciting or less exciting, but I think ultimately probably they always leave with what they want, which is 6 days of racing in their legs.
And if you think if you're Sam Welsford in the Borough-Hansgrohe team, you're not going to be saying that was a boring.
I guarantee you, there's somewhere. There are one of these bars around here somewhere already.
Israel Premier team, they're not going to be saying it was boring.
No.
I even think Jonathan Narvaez. He's not going to say it was boring. He won the
Del Toro certainly isn't.
They're not going to say it was boring, and so.
What do we say? There were 70 odd Tour Down Under debutants here this year, so I'm sure each of those enjoyed their trip to Australia also.
What about the Dutch guy, Bart Lehman?
Yeah, we didn't talk about him at all this week, but he ended up.
He's been everywhere. Just threw that in. A year ago, he was in the military.
Yep.
In the Netherlands, and here he is.
Fifth overall,
and he was up there yesterday, and he's kind of a name that sort of slipped through a little bit. I know in our narrative, but other people's narrative. It was only fortunate, a Dutch journalist who was talking to me about him.
Yeah, he was fifth yesterday on Willunga, fourth today on Mount Lofty, fifth overall. It's a great result for him. And
I also think, unless you've got that on the list, I'm jumping the gun here, Matt. So the Aussie team did very well.
Yes, I do want to talk about that, but I was going to say just on the route and how it all played out. I heard Stuart O'Grady interviewed this morning at the stage start, and he was saying that he was really expecting and probably hoping really that stage 4 into Port Elliot would have more wind. Mm-hmm. Normally it does get quite a bit windier down there, and as we talked about yesterday, it really didn't happen yesterday. And I think had that maybe blown apart in the wind, we'd be talking about the race being a lot more exciting than it was. But yeah, as you say, Rip, there was a lot of positives to take out of it. I think stage 2 into Lobethal with that Fox Creek Road climb, and Del Toro's attack was a fantastic finish. Mm-hmm. The emergence of Del Toro was amazing, and then the 2 climbing stages to finish for the first time in TDU history was really exciting. A thought experiment though, what do you guys think it would be like if they split up those climbing stages? Rather than having the 4 days of sprint stages to start with, you'd gone Lofty on stage 3 and then Willunga on 6 or something like that.
I like the idea because I think there's a chance to throw everything into one day. Be willing to take positive risks, be willing to dare to have a crack. If it didn't work out, you've got a day to recover and figure out why, and then you work out what I have to do the next day. I think the danger of having 2 hilltop finishes in the first World Tour event of the year is that you may, unsure of how you're going to back up from a big effort on one day and end up racing cautiously on the first hilltop finish and be thinking, well, if I finish strong there, I can really have a crack on the last day. It's an interesting question because I'm sure someone can put an argument that'll actually just convince me to reject everything I just said.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a foolproof suggestion. It just makes me curious because it did feel like it was a very much a race in 2 parts. You had the 4 sprint stages-ish, and then you had the 2 climbing stages. And I wonder if we'd had a climbing stage in the middle there, and then we'd had a sort of a GC shape starting to emerge. If we'd then gone into a stage where crosswinds were likely to play a factor, maybe that would have made things even more interesting.
I think at the very least, that would eliminate this sort of label of being a race of 2 parts.
That's true.
And that's something that could be fixed by that.
Yeah.
And it's not going to harm either side, either a more sprinters orientated team or a GC climbing type of team. It's not going to be to a disadvantage to anybody.
Yeah, and we've really seen that kind of split approach in the past where we've had uphill finishes in Paracombe, you might remember, where that's often stage 2 or stage 3 before a Willunga finish on stage 6. So
I like the Paracombe.
Yeah, Paracombe's a great finish. So that sort of format has been tested in the past, and I wonder if it's something they'll consider.
Well, Rupert, you give the argument for it. I'll give the argument against.
See, I knew this was coming. I could see Ronan's look. That's why I covered both bases.
Well, I tend to agree with you, but in the interest of balance for the podcast here, I'll give the other opinion. Is how often do we hear about stages of the Tour or whatever race it might be, and you sort of think, well, they've got this summit finish and they got this time trial and they got this summit finish, and you're sort of, the whole focus just becomes on those stages, and you sort of spend the stages in between waiting for the next GC showdown. So there's maybe an argument for Saturday and Sunday, biggest potential to get crowds on the road with being a weekend, and all the focus being on those 2 days to decide the overall, and then you're not having to wait.
Yep.
Boring sprinter stages.
Well, right, the counter of the counter is that the Tour de France is 3 weeks, so and this is only 6 days, and also I think obviously Tour de France is covering a lot more terrain, not just geographically but also politically. They have to cover whatever political boxes they have to tick about regions going to or not in one year or the other. Notwithstanding, I do, I mean, the idea of a super week, weekend is enticing, but look, I think all these things. I think going back to Stuart O'Grady as race director, I'm sure these are ideas, and I always wonder, give you a race director of any event, what must be like? Everyone's giving you your opinion on what you should be doing.
We've got the easiest job. We can just take shots from here and don't have to do anything about it.
I want to ask you a question then, in Stuart O'Grady's defence. Then. I don't know if it's too harsh to say, were you entertained when Sam Welsford won his first stage? But was that exciting? I think the answer would be yes. Then the very next day we had Del Toro and that fabulous finish. That was exciting.
Yes.
Then we had 2 more Welsford's wins. Yes. But we had Oscar Onley on top of Wollonga yesterday, which was, I think, enthralling. And then today's finish with a spectator getting onto the final 100 metres and a downhill sprint finish between 4 riders was exciting also. So.
Yeah, 4 of 6 stages.
It wasn't too bad.
It's a really subjective thing. What is exciting? Each to their own. I mean,
do you want the entire stage to be exciting, or do you want the finish to be exciting? And rarely do we actually get entire stages that are exciting unless you've got wind or something like that.
In the first race of the year and all that sort of stuff, yada, yada, yada. And it's true. I mean, one thing, though, it wasn't as hot this year's Tour Down Under consistently over the week as it has been. They had a hot day. Stage one was the hot day. And obviously, that was kind of hot too. So, look, these are all, every single point we're saying has got a counterpoint to it. But that's the other thing about a World Tour event, or that this is the first event of a World Tour. This is like the shop window of the World Tour. This is what sets the template for the narrative of the World Tour up until it ends at the end of the year. And it's inevitably going to be possibly one of the most scrutinised of the World Tour events, because as the World Tour continues during the year, it becomes more just results driven. You realise, so and so he's won that event and that event. The events are backing up one after the other, and there's not so much post-event analysis of whether it was exciting or not. It's about the results and who's on form for the next race and the Tour de France and all that. This is the starting point. So I think everyone pulls to pieces the first World Tour event. Not in a negative way. I think it's constructive. At least it's healthy discussion.
I will say the glaring omission from this year's edition was a time trial.
Well, there was. Richie Port nearly broke his record.
Just
by
on
6
that
seconds.
also, I just want to mention there's a lot of talk about how close Richie Port got to his Strava KOM for Wollonga Hill.
Do you want to give some context quickly on what this event was?
So there was a time trial on Wollonga Hill yesterday for, I was going to say for amateurs to enter, but
anyone could enter it.
Well, Sarah Gigante was riding.
Yeah, so anyone could enter it, but also Richie Port and Sarah Gigante were racing. Yep.
Yeah, and the idea was that both of those riders were going to go for their King and Queen of the Mountain segments on the climb. Richie Port got within 10 seconds of his Wollonga Hill KOM, which he took in the race one of the years that he won. 2020, was it?
But he didn't win that year.
Okay,
he just had the fastest time.
He won the stage though.
No, he didn't even win the stage that year. No. He just had the fastest time for that hill. Anyway,
the point I was going to make was that there was a lot of talk that he was within 10 seconds despite being, I think it was 6 seconds or something, despite being retired for 2 years. And what I haven't heard mentioned was actually he did that entire segment yesterday on his own in a time trial, whereas a couple of years ago when he broke the KOM, he would have been in a peloton racing into the bottom of the climb at much higher speed. And so I think yesterday's performance is even more remarkable.
Yes, I think the one he did the other day was better.
Possibly, yeah.
A better solo performance than... And also, add to that, you've got the motivation of being in a race. All those factors, and I think this one is like him.
I can't imagine he was all that motivated to do Wollonga. I like the fact that he did turn up and do something like that, because there's very little for him to gain and a heck of a lot for him to lose in doing so. And the same for Sarah Gigante. She just won on Wollonga last weekend. What is there to gain by going out and going for a Strava segment? And it is brilliant to see, but that's the theory on why we don't see more events like that or more pros going for Strava segments, is because really they've got very little to gain from it.
There was a time where, when riders would come into Two Down Under, and then suddenly, some people would try and jump on their wheels and sit on their wheels to see what watts they're producing, just to see how long they can. And you can imagine being a pro, and then suddenly, there's a whole bunch of old mates behind you, just trying to see, and you're focused on doing a specific effort or a segment for your training program. Old mates sitting there judging you and probably going to post it later and have come up with their own analysis and assessments.
Well, you remember Remco last year lost ahead with a guy who tried to follow him.
Oh yeah. So I think the fact that Richie's comes back and is willing to do it.
Yeah.
And he's officially retired, as you said, Ronan. There's nothing that he doesn't have to do.
Doesn't have to prove anything. Yeah. We saw him last night at the car park live. He looks really fit still.
Yes. Also worth mentioning about the car park climb is that Richie Porte was racing there. Also, he was a last minute inclusion because a certain someone was due to race. Wade Wallace, or co-founder of Escape Collective, was due to race Mitch Docker, and yes, yours truly here. But yours truly was recording a podcast and as such missed the race, and they called in a replacement at the last moment. That replacement happened to be Richie Porte. Yeah. Which, as I said to Wade last night, he owes me big time, because by me not turning up, it meant that Wade was racing both Mitch and Richie, two former pros, and Wade managed to take the win in the car park climb against those two, and he now has the biggest accolade he could ever have in terms of his racing career in beating those two former pros.
Well, and he's fully prepared for last night too, wasn't he, Wade? Because he wasn't he eating his fruit bowl and having a shower, getting ready for the event?
Possibly, yeah.
I'm not sure what his preparation looked like.
I will say, out of you and Richie, only one of you holds the Everesting world record. Also, it's not Richie Porte.
There is only also one of us who has ever won a professional bike race or stood on the podium of the Tour de France. So let's just add that context also.
Actually, if you're very quick at the Tour de France, when the dark dims on the Champs-Élysées, if you get up there on the podium, you can. Just a little tour traveller's tip. Got to be quick though before the gendarmes
security pull you off there.
But there is opportunity.
Is this from experience?
So you could actually say, you're the whatever number Australian on the podium of the Tour de France.
Wow.
I haven't attempted or seen it yet.
You sound like you're speaking from experience.
I could be accused of inciting scurrilous behaviour now. I won't get accreditation.
Rup, you talked before about the Australian national team. They had a great week.
Yeah, I thought they did. I mean, they're always very active in this race, and it's almost like this DNA in the team or responsibility. They're there. It's like each time they come back, you don't want to be in an Australian team that becomes a non-player in this race now. So there is a pressure on them to do that, but also the pressure's opportunity. And you see not just the young guys, because in that team there's always a balance of experience and not just youth. And I think, we saw that, just looking at the GC, Damien Howson.
Yeah, ninth overall. And, that was great to see that. And you also saw the team throughout the race with the, in all the categories. They were there. They were in the breakaways. Yeah, they were up the road just about every day. I think today might have been the only day they weren't up the road, or maybe there was another. But
yeah, well, look at the climbing category. Luke Burns.
Yep,
he won that.
Easy winner,
and he sealed it up yesterday. But he didn't just, he had to work and strategise for it, and so did the team. To be able to shore up those points or stop other teams from winning points. They, obviously have a, experienced management there with Matt Wilson, and I think that there is a blend coming there in that national team and with the ARA and all that. It's working well. And certainly, I think these teams that are front up now for the Two Down Under, they're not coming in shy or feeling intimidated. Even though I haven't actually found out I'm not sure if you guys heard of any anecdotes of what Matt Wilson said at the beginning of the tour, how the team usually gets a bit of argy-bargy and pushing out, a bit of big brother treatment or not. But if they did, it certainly didn't put them off.
Yeah, I heard earlier in the week somebody saying that even the World Tour level riders or the pro team riders in that national team, so Damien Housen and Michael Storer, tend to get pushed around when they're racing for the national team because people don't realise who they are. They just see the jersey and they think, you don't know what you're doing, you're a young kid, we're just going to push you around.
Yeah. Well, the Damien said they recognise his silver hair.
That is true, that is pretty distinctive.
But also, Medway, you wrote about, I mean, that was still like, that's a great story. From B grade to World Tour, although, and even just out of a year, wasn't he racing C grade?
Yeah, exactly right. Just over a year ago.
Thank you for the Medway segue there, because I wanted to bring him up. I seen him in the start paddock this morning. He's actually having a lot of bother with his power meter. He had actually stripped the threads on the battery compartment of his pedal-based power meter, and someone else actually with the same power meter pedals turned up, threw their bike over the barrier to him. He then took the threaded battery cover off said bike and tried to install it onto his own bike. Apparently he had stripped the threads and the cover flew off. The battery disappeared down the road. He found the cover, couldn't find the battery, so found this other rider who had the same pedals and replaced the battery. And I don't know if he had power data during the stage or not, because ultimately the pedal was still the thread. You know, he had threaded it there, so or stripped the threads. So, but he was doing the work himself. He wasn't relying on the mechanic. He was getting down and he was there with the Allen key or the hex key, and yeah.
Good on him. What a way to top and tail his first World Tour event with a crash on stage one, and there he is dealing with that. That's great. That's a bit of a Michael Rogers moment, you know, when he won the Tour racing for AIS and a punter came over and said, here's the bike.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's
cool.
what's great about this event, isn't it? It's these things happen.
Yeah. And there's a real community feel to it, isn't there? Riders, spectators can get nice and close, and yeah, it is a race where you feel like you're in amongst it as a fan. Speaking of Australian teams, and we've talked a little bit about them this week already, but we do need to talk about Jayco, I think. I want to go back to Luke Plapp's comment in the press conference at the start of the week.
He's never going to escape this comment.
No, he's not. And, you know, we gave context at the time that he probably wasn't meaning to say we're going to win every stage in the GC. It was probably we're going to try each stage to win.
Yep.
And I think that was a realistic goal. I think on paper their team was a team that could have had somebody winning every stage.
Yep, and there was no sense of arrogance or chest beating about it. It was just that
this is what we're going to try and do.
And these are the standards we set ourselves, and I think most elite athletes would be setting the same sort of standards. And I think, technically that comment with a nice tongue-in-cheek, I think most people see it with a tongue-in-cheek comment when they say how that's come to bite him and the team in the butt. But in all honesty, it's you got the mixture of his youth, the form he was in after his third national championship, sense of ambition, and he is an open talker, and I think we've got to embrace that.
Yeah,
we've got to embrace it. And Luke Plapp, good on you, mate, for putting it out there.
For sure.
Because that's your ambition. That's the team's ambition.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be shy or ever apologetic for it. His exit from the race, as awful as it was, you know, it's something which happens in bike racing. And I'm sure everybody knows that. And I think we're going to see a lot more of Luke, not just this season, but, you know, his imprint on world cycling. He's going to grow, and he'll be, I think he's a personality, not just a bike racer. And I think it's great when personalities in bike racing comes out. It actually gives other people confidence to talk and be themselves. So, Luke, keep on being who you are, and all the best with your recovery.
Yeah, 100%. Unfortunately for the team, though, they only really managed, the best position was fourth on the stage. That was the first stage with Caleb Ewan. They got seventh on GC with Simon Yates, but I think they'll probably walk away from this week feeling like it really didn't go their way.
Yeah, it was a hard tour for them overall, and while there is a long way to go in the season when you're an Aussie World Tour team and you've got the calibre that you have on paper, comes with the expectation and pressure, not just from the public or the media, but also, understandably, I'd suggest from the team sponsor and Jerry Ryan. You know, Jerry Ryan is a business person, and this is a business and professional cycling. So I'm sure that the debrief will be robust and, as they say in the trade, robust and honest. Looking forward.
Yes.
And but so it should be, because I think you can't. just put that under the carpet that, it's behind us now, we move on to the Middle East and the rest of the European season. This is a key point for, as an Aussie team, Aussie sponsored with Aussie riders in it, and there's enough warning, a time for preparation for those riders to be at their optimal level to perform in that circumstance, because I know we've got the Cadel Evans road race next week, but that's a one-day race. You're talking about tours and a one-day race, so not saying one's less or more than the other, but Two Down Under is the opening World Tour event of the year. That's the stage and that's the moment to perform. So that's behind them now, but it wasn't a good week.
No. As Matt White said the other day to you, Rupe, and I think we might have touched on it yesterday, a lot of this will be forgotten if they go on to win Milan San Remo or stages of the Giro or the Tour or something bigger later on.
Which is true. I mean, with criticism, I think, again, when we're looking at the criticism or the critique of it, it's about the now, not so much about saying a team or a rider is, at the crossroads or done and dusted or things like that. It's about just saying this week was not good, they underperformed, but there were circumstances for that, I'm sure, probably circumstances we're not all fully aware of. The fact is, it wasn't a good week for them. And if you're a supporter of Joko Alula or all those riders, there should be discourse amongst the media and the fans about the reasons why, but also keep in mind at the same time, any sports team and rider who has underperformed, they know it. They're not feeling good about it. No matter how much you dress that up, then they know it better than we know it and what anybody knows it. And they'll be trying to work on ways to fix it. So
the last point I'd make on that is just that I think it stands out given how dominant they were at Nationals. And I know that the Australian Nationals is not a World Tour event, but I think when you go 1, 2, 3 in the men's road race and 1 and 3 in the women's road race and you dominate most of the other races, there was an expectation there that they would come in, particularly on the men's side with Simon Yates then coming into the squad, that they would do well. So yeah, that's probably enough on that. We've talked about that plenty, but there were plenty of highlights from this week, and we've talked about a few. Obviously, Israel Premier Tech and Williams, that was a big one. Del Toro, we've talked about on stage 2. Welsford was brilliant. His lead-out train was brilliant. Oscar Onley, one of the finds of the week as well. And even someone like Alaphilippe, I think we talked about him yesterday. But again, he was up there today. He ended up 6th on GC with 6th on today's stage as well. And good to see him firing early in the year, and I'm sure he'll only improve as the year goes on.
Yeah, it's good to see him in such good form early in the season, and the early in the season being the key part in that phrase, because Alaphilippe in his peak form, in his Tour de France yellow jersey wearing form or World Championships winning form, he comes to Tour Down Under and he wins the overall fairly comfortably in all likelihood. But last season wasn't his best season ever. There was question marks sort of on many people's lips about whether Alaphilippe was going to see that sort of condition again or not, and obviously we haven't got those answers yet, but I think the answer we did get this week is that he has certainly come into the 2024 season with intent, and if he's going this well right now and is taking his first race this season as seriously as he seemingly was taking Tour Down Under, then he obviously has big goals ahead, I would say, and he should have big goals ahead. He's one of the best riders in the world, but I think some of the question marks are maybe rising last year. It seems like he might be on the verge of putting those to bed, and could he go well in Milan San Remo, won it again, possibly. He's won Milan San Remo, hasn't he? Yeah.
I'll tell you who was an interesting name. If you want to look at some of the if you look at the Warhorse category, I mean that in respect.
Is that in the results sheet? I haven't seen that page.
No, I was just looking at, I better check I'm looking at the right.
I think it's on Pro Cycling Stats.
Oh, okay, Warhorse category.
Statistics.
Warhorse. Yeah, sure.
Now, Volker Mollema, he was 9th today.
Okay.
He's been for consistency. Maybe you can quickly check on how many years he's been a professional. He's been there for a long time, Volker Mollema. He was 9th today, and he did very well, I thought. And it's just a little performance indicator. We'll talk about riders we're looking for the future, and he's been in and around the top end in Grand Tours and stages and things, and he's also a guy who's also been really good to talk to, from as a journalist point of view. He's always been open to chats and everything, and he ended up Oh, look, I guess his GC was kind of irrelevant. He's 15th. Not irrelevant, but, in the context of that, I think his ride today, though, was a little bit of a form indicator.
Pro since 2008. So 16 years, and he's contracted through 2026 with Little Track. So
to 20 years. So they see value in the Warhorse, don't they? He's got another. Then you're looking at 19 years. I mean,
it's a long time.
Oh my goodness, that's almost 4 Olympic periods, and however you want to look at it, convert it, it's a long time.
I've never had a job for more than 2 years.
You didn't tell us that in the job interview.
You didn't ask.
So Ronan, let's change gears a little bit. You had a chat just before with some of the operations people behind the TDU about what's involved in moving the whole circus from here in Adelaide over to Victoria, to Geelong, to Torquay for the Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race and its side events.
Yeah, I've been trying to write that up there just before we started this podcast, and the description I've used in the title so far, I'm not sure if it's the one we'll stick with or not, but chaos, cost and cases, because the team paddock I walked into it not really knowing what to expect after the race, not really thinking anything. I thought it would just see the same team paddock we'd seen all week. But when I walked in, there was literally bike bags as far as the eye could see, boxes, cases, mechanics running around frantically. Long story short, the Tour Down Under teams effectively had 2 or 3 hours post stage to pack up all their bits and pieces, all the bikes, all the wheels, everything they'd brought to Adelaide into bike bags and different sorts of cases and boxes that they were using. All that stuff then had to be loaded onto 3 semi-trailer trucks that were commissioned specifically to drive from here to Geelong and Torquay, and those trucks were leaving this evening. They were going to drive through the night and deliver all that kit to the 3 different hotels that the men's and women's teams will be staying in for the Cadel Evans Great Ocean Race, and the riders and staff themselves will be flying tomorrow on 3 separate flights, 2 sort of consumer public flights and 1 specially chartered flight with Virgin Australia to get the riders down to Geelong for the Cadel Evans Great Ocean Race next week. And it was just so different from what we'd seen all week in that team paddock. It was all week had been like, mechanics just steadily working away, and everything was calm, and the riders would come and go, and it's really nice as well, actually. The public and sort of spectators can come in and walk around the paddock and see what the mechanics are at, and get up close and see the sort of work that goes into maintaining these bikes. But today when we walked in, everything was entirely shut down, and it was just absolutely bedlam in there. So it was
like an evacuation zone. There'd be some alert that we hadn't got the email about.
Somebody had rang the bell and said last orders, and everybody knew they had to get everything out of there.
It's just a reminder to me of how many moving parts there are to something like this.
And I mean, like, it's also worth noting that actually the Cadel Evans race had 3 sort of logistics officers on site in Adelaide today to assist with the transfer of all the parts and everything to Geelong. I got speaking to them. They're from O2 Events, and what they were telling me was that they had booked the flights, they had organised the chartered flight that they're going to be taking, they'd organised the 3 trucks that would be transferring everything down. What they also told me was that what tends to happen is that the mechanics and team staff have had a long week's work, and what they want nothing more than is a pint at the bar. And so when the trucks pull up, their intention is to get their stuff on as quickly as possible. But they try to maintain order. What they do is they put the hard cases and cardboard boxes at the bottom of the trailer bed, and then they put the soft bike cases and softer goods on top of those, fill out the whole trailer. But what one of them was telling me was that inevitably what happens is the front of the trailer is really neat and organised, and the closer they get to the back of the trailer, the more chaotic it gets. But yeah, they estimated, they didn't have a dollar figure for the cost in that, but they estimated in getting the riders from Adelaide to the 2 Cadel's races was a few $100,000 at least.
Yeah, it's interesting actually how the 2 organisations, the 2 races work together, because in some ways they are competitors. The TDU is owned by the South Australian government. Cadel's race, the major sponsor of that, is the Victorian government. There is a friendly rivalry. You talk to organisers of both, and they talk in kind of hushed tones about each other. But they actually do have to collaborate, because things like this, where they have to move a lot of equipment and personnel across the state border, but also in terms of flights. So getting the European teams here, the two races split the cost of flying everybody here and then flying them back to Europe. So
I wasn't able to confirm that part. I spoke to one of the teams, and what they'd said was that they thought Down Under paid for the flights because they had the same ticket for their outward and return leg journey, but who knows if there's some cost sharing.
Sometimes the internal costs can be relatively comparatively, not relatively as expensive, because internal travel and internal costs can be huge. But I think it's actually, I know when they first were talking about the Cadel Evans Road Race and trying to get it going before it got going, and then trying to broker a manageable agreement with the Two Down Under organisation, that wasn't simple. There was a lot of
not at all.
contentious discussion and virulent discourse. Robust discussion. And to be fair to all parties, actually credit to all parties, that they have got to this point now where they can actually broker an agreement is huge. I mean, Australian cycling is not known for being great in brokering these sort of situations. I know back in the day, years ago, when with the Herald Sun Tour and the old Commonwealth Bank Classic, which was then an amateur race, and but they were trying to, even they were trying to see how the two races could work together with trying to get riders who maybe. The Sun Tour was a professional race, but there's just always discussion about how the two could work hand in hand, basically try and bring people down. And it was always, it never happened, obviously, and it was very disappointing. But I think the fact that where we've got to now, where that can happen, I actually would like to see what the Two Down Under organisation and Cadel Evans Road Race organisations, say co-agreement or partnership, however you want to look at it, how that stacks up as a really good example in world cycling. I don't know. I'm just trying to think off my hand, but I can't remember what other races.
Maybe the Canadian WorldTour one day.
But aren't they kind of the same?
I think they're owned by the same organisation.
Okay.
Like where there's opposing events, and both events have sponsorship from their state governments. And here, when do you see state governments work together? We're going down the rabbit hole here. Anyway, I'll backpedal. But rest assured, I think it's a credit that we've got to this point where they can work together.
Yeah.
It is also mutually beneficial. Like the teams are going to be, and the top riders are going to be more willing to travel to Australia. First of all, if they can go for an extended period, especially in January when the weather in Europe isn't going to be all that great for training, even in the likes of the training camp locations. But then secondly, if they can double it up and get in, not only are they getting an extra race with Cadel Evans Great Ocean Race, but there's also another race that they can, a one-day race they can do on Wednesday, I believe. I'm not sure if they'll all do it or not, but there's opportunity to get racing kilometres, and it's another draw. I think, well, I don't think, I'm pretty certain that Cadel Evans Great Ocean Race would probably suffer if the Tour Down Under wasn't bringing the riders here for a stage race.
100%. It wouldn't exist.
But the other way around, I'm sure there is. It's probably not measurable, but there's probably some added benefit the riders can tell themselves, well, I'm getting almost a full week of racing when you consider all the racing they can do.
And also they've got the midweek race coming back in for the men's and women's next Wednesday and Thursday, which is another race. Okay, it's not World Tour, but it's another race, another opportunity to
just get those kilometres,
those racing kilometres. So you can go home from here, with a month or plus more of good training, good racing. The only downside that a lot of the Europeans would possibly see is 5 or 6 weeks away from home, while the families are back in winter. I mean, I'm not being flippant about it, but it's a long time at the start of a long season to suddenly be away during an uncomfortable time of year when it's snowbound and, well, not bound, but snowy and wet.
No, I'll not name any names because I think it's it's their private life and it's not really up for discussion. But it was refreshing to see some of the. Well, obviously the Australian pros, but some European pros also with their families and young kids and all in Adelaide, and that was I think that was nice to see.
I saw that even today. I couldn't remember who the rider was, but he was obviously one of the Dutch riders, I think, and you could tell that was, well, shouldn't assume, but it looked like it was their parents, and certainly a man and a woman who was elderly. and he was just him walking. I was actually just thinking that, wow, it's kind of cool now. Maybe the thing is now you can encourage your parents to have the dream holiday, come over to Australia and drop in to see the race. That's, now there's more confidence building over these years about coming to Australia to travel here. At the very beginning in '99, it was seen like this new frontier fraught with risk. Snakes and spiders that are going to kill you, and kangaroos going to jump on top of you, and drop bears falling out
outside
of
of Australia, I haven't seen a single deadly animal all week, or any type of thing that was trying to kill me.
They've seen you though.
They've seen you. They've been watching. They're watching. Just up there. No, but you know what I mean. At the very beginning, when Eric Zabel came over for the first, he wanted to take the first flight home because of the heat.
Oh yeah,
and that was serious. We spoke about this earlier in the week when they had to sort of come up with some little white lies about how there's going to be a cold front coming soon, and then Mike Turner had to go back and think, geez, you better check on that one. And it did, not a cold front, but a cooler front. But it was seen as a professional cyclist, it was seen as this bold new frontier that you may not return from.
Now they're coming looking for the heat as part of their training these days.
But now maybe they're encouraging their parents and family and partners come over for a good time.
There you go. You could write the pitch for it, mate.
I don't work for South Australian Tourism.
Okay. You've mentioned one rider whose parents might have been here. I know another rider in the women's Tour Down Under who had a parent come down and was sort of like the final nudge to get this parent to come and visit another family member who had been nearby in Australia for 20 years or something. So it worked that way. But then also the rider I was referring to earlier was it was actually his wife and young child who were here. So
there you go.
Yeah, it's nice season opening friendly sort of.
You just need a marriage proposal or two.
Yeah, that's what we're missing this week.
Geez, I knew there was something.
All right, let's wrap this up. So next Wednesday we have the Geelong Classic, which is the one-day women's race. It's a criterium. It's not UCI categorised, unfortunately, but it's raced on a circuit similar to Bay Crits. So that'll be happening on Wednesday evening. The Thursday is the Surf Coast Classic that we've just talked about, the men's one-day UCI 1.1 race, starting in Lawn, finishing in Torquay. Probably going to be a sprint, I would think. Some hills through there, but likely to be a sprint finish. And then next weekend, there's some applause going on in the background. I can only assume
that was
for
our
us.
live audience.
Yeah.
What was it telling us to wrap up?
Yeah, that's right. They're trying to get to the pub as well. Next Saturday and Sunday, the Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race, the women's race on Saturday, men's race on the Sunday, and that will wrap up the Australian Summer of Racing, effectively.
Are there any NRS events or anything like that after Tudon wraps up?
There's the Melbourne to Warrnambool, the Melbourne to Warrnambool Classic, which is one of, if not the biggest one-day race in Australia, one of the oldest races in the world.
Second oldest race in the world, only behind Liège.
Thank you so much to both of you, Ronan, for joining me and for dissecting the TDU this week. It's been a lot of fun, and
my pleasure.
I hope people listening have enjoyed it as well. A big thank you to all of our members at Escape Collective. We've said it a lot this week and in previous episodes, of course, but Escape doesn't exist without member support. So for those of you that have pitched in and helped us get Escape off the ground and supported us in the almost 1 year since, we really do appreciate it, more than you probably realise. And for those of you that like what we do and would like to see more of it, hear more of it, you can support us over at escapecollective.com/join, and it really does make a difference. Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.